This lesson is about capturing the warmth of sunlight in your paintings. So I want to point out that when light directly hits the object, it's going to be translated differently than if it is behind an object. I've circled the areas where the light is hitting objects directly. These are called highlights. And I'll be adding some white to those colors in order to lighten the tone. In addition to the bright backlit colors, I've circled reflected light. It's bouncing around and adding a lot of color. So you have to look at objects where they are beside each other and realize that all those colors affects everything around it. If an orange is beside an apple, the apple's going to look more orange in where that light reflects. And you're going to see some orange on the pear. Or by the pomegranate, that red is going to be reflected into the green pear. Those bright sunflowers are going to be bouncing a lot of yellows around. Even the wood in the background is picking up the oranges and yellows from the arrangement. All of that color bounces around, and that's what's going to make your paintings look more professional. Now, my original reference photo that I shot on my kitchen table is taller than the 8x10 format that I have for my wood panel. So I'm going to have to distort it a little bit to get it to fit on the smaller panel. Now, I loved the original composition, but it needed some help. Here you can see that I have added a few things to make this composition even stronger. In addition to the big sunflower in the center, I added a little bit of rose and foliage. Don't forget the reflection in the windows. Now, I think that this is a really strong composition. Let's get started. First, I'm going to seal this cradled wood panel with Cad Red Medium Hue acrylic. This is going to add a lot of vibrance to the layout. Choose a great underpainting or undercoating for your basis. No need to work directly on top of a white canvas. Something like this, making the right choice of the color that goes underneath can add so much to your painting to make it very vibrant. And of course, that's what we're going for with this. We want a lot of warmth and sunshine to show through in this painting. Just slap it on there and let it dry. I did pre-tape the edges so I don't get those really messy. You might want to paint the edges. It's up to you. After quickly sketching with Vine charcoal, I'm brushing off the excess charcoal. And there I have put out my palette, and go ahead and copy that or take a picture with your phone so you know what colors I'm working with. You can use acrylic or oil. So using the purple, there's a lot of purple down there. Yeah, I got it, one of my freaking long hairs stuck in the paint. It happens a lot. I'm going in with establishing some of the shadows. So a lot of those, I'll go over all that again, but right now I'm just kind of laying out where shadows go. I'm letting some of that red show through. I want that warmth. Establishing that there's a lot of reflected light on that. I'm not painting wood color, or that is painted wood. It's a cream color. That's all about that light reflecting in there. From my photo, it is kind of crooked like that, so I just kept it that way, a little distorted, because we're looking down on the scene a little bit, so that perspective kind of runs off to the side. Just establishing some of the foliage, all very loose, just barely laying in colors and building it up. Now I'm putting in the centers of the sunflowers, and I realized later those really should have been darker. But again, just trying to lay in some loose color. Color bouncing off the bottom. Everything that is not the main focal point is going to be pretty loose and sloppy. The whole thing is actually going to be pretty loose, but you'll see a few areas where I tighten up a little more. Okay, so now I'm in there with cad yellow and laying in some of the brightest petals where the sunlight is filtering through the petals. Okay, now skipping down to some of the fruit. Just laying in some basic colors on everything. And if the sunlight is shining directly on it, I've got to get my fingers in there to soften up stuff. You'll have some white mixed in if the sun is directly on it. But keep in mind, if it's reflected color, you will not have white mixed in with it. You want that really bright, intense color. Kind of establishing the wicker basket down there. Also, when you're doing your shadows, think of what is the opposite color. Okay, you're going to put the opposite color in your shadow as the main color. You'll also have some reflected light colors in there. So if I have an orange, I'm going to put some blue in the shadow. In that pomegranate, I'm going to have some green in the shadow. That pear has red in the shadow. So think about opposites on your color wheel when you're deciding shadows. Now this whole painting took me about an hour and a half. There were some breaks in there where I, step away. But it's just about layering. I was really happy with kind of quickly laying things in. Again, it's a study. When I do the larger version of this, it may be more like 20 inches tall instead of 10. And I may get more detailed in a few areas. But I have to say that I really enjoy this loose type of painting too. If you've seen some of my other work, you can see that I can also paint very tight hyperrealism. But I really enjoy this, more impressionistic, expressive style. Getting some oranges in there, and again building up some of the yellow. And I am looking at the reference photo on the laptop, but I'm not trying to mimic that photo. I don't care how many petals there are here and how many leaves are there, and I'm really just trying to get across the feeling of that reference shot. And I think that's what painting should be about. I have a beautiful photo of it. That's done. I think that our jobs as painters, as artists, is to now turn it into a beautiful piece of art. You know, how are you going to interpret it where people get that feeling of the sun and just how warm and energetic that is, how vibrant it is, without going crazy. Okay, I had to bring some red umber in. It's a very dark Vasari color because I just needed a few darker darks. That is a much higher end brand than some of my other colors that I use for these studies. And you're going to get a lot more pigment with it. So you're going to be able to establish some darker darks. And a little goes a long way. So that's the difference between some of the brands that are less expensive. They may not, have as much pigment, so you're having to use more. But the expensive ones have dense pigment, and you don't have to use as much. So something to think about. Okay, and as always, come back the next day, look at your work, see what needs to be adjusted. This is usually where I come in and I soften edges. This one thing I love about oils. It's great, the next day to come in and soften up some of these sharp lines. You can still move things around a little bit. And yeah, I tend to get my fingers in there. And just make any final adjustments. I think this could stand to go darker. This, it looks awfully flat, so I'm going to add a darker dark, leaving a little bit of a highlight. Give that a little bit of added dimension. And, I can pick away at a painting forever. But I do recommend that you put it away overnight and then take a fresh look at it. Again, let me reiterate that we are not trying to mimic the photograph in this case. We are trying to express the feeling of the photograph, of what we saw in the photograph. Thanks so much for joining me for this lesson, and don't forget to like, subscribe. It really helps out the channel, and ask any questions that you have. Have a great day. Happy painting.